Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Roll of a Tangent podcast, where we sometimes analyze works of fiction we read, but always roll off into tangents and talk about something else. It's kind of our specialty. And hopefully maybe today will be a little bit different because we have something very interesting to talk about. A story called The Twonky, written by, under the pseudonym Lewis Padgett, but it really was written by a duo of husband and wife, is it, guys?
Yes.
Were they
Yes.
So it was C.L. Moore and Heny Kuttner, the dynamic duo, which always kind of brought some warmth to my heart. The idea that a married couple would be doing something like this together. It's really cool.
It's like Edmund Hamilton and Lee Brackett. That was another couple.
Yeah. And honestly, the story tonight is a bit strange, to say the least. We were supposed to record this on the 31st of October, which was the Halloween, but we had to skip a week. And when I was reading this, Kaz even mentioned, "Hey, I'm gonna look for a story that's gonna like fit Halloween." And I began reading the story. And I was like, "What? How is this Halloween?" And then I read the end, and I said to myself, "This is the most terrifying thing that ever happened. I'm never buying appliances ever again." So basically, the story of this fantastical tale is that some guy gets teleported through a Warple snag of some sort into an assembly line to a boss who cares so little about the workforce that he has, and he just has this turnover of hundreds of people leaving him or something. He doesn't recognize anybody, so he just sees this random dude who has appeared out of nowhere, and he's like, "Hey man, you should go work." And that dude works, and he creates the Twonky, which looks like just a broadcast radio. And the Twonky goes into circulation, and this unfortunate chap buys it without even knowing that this is something that will change his life forever.
I feel I should cut in here just to mention the time frame in which this short story is written, because it would give a very good visualization of what we're talking about, because I think it's actually a really important point. So this was this was written in 1940 something, I think. Just after World War II started, right?
Yeah. So we're still in World War II at this point.
Yeah. So I think like the visualization of this short story is very important, and it will become very clear very soon. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so anyway, this radio is supposed to teach him how to be like a better person, maybe, or to enslave him in some sort of a way, because it keeps repeating actions against him. Like it lights so it wants to teach him out of bad habits. It lights his cigarettes all the time and makes him smoke, which I was thinking, like, that's not a good habit. That's bad, actually. So what is this thing actually?
It limits the number of cigarettes, though. When he tries it too often, it takes it away from him.
It's true, but still, I mean, the amount it should be giving him is 0, because smoking kills.
But we only know that now. I mean, back when that story was written, all of the ads in the magazine.
Maybe we can just start. Maybe we can actually just summarize the story instead of jumping into what we found really crazy about the story. So a quick summary would be, as Nikki says, this guy from somewhere, we don't know where, we never knew where he came from, dropped into this assembly line in a temporal snag or something like that, and then he started building this thing that he called a Twonky, which is in the shape of a broadcast radio, which an important thing I feel at this point is to mention that the broadcast radio, this is in the 1940s. Everything was huge back then. So this broadcast radio was the size of a cabinet.
Yeah. No transistors in those days.
Yeah, and then after he built the Twonky, he had this guy, he had temporary amnesia, so he couldn't remember where he was. He built this Twonky, and then he went back to his timeline when he remembered, but left the Twonky in the factory, and nobody could tell the difference between that Twonky and the rest of the broadcast radio. It looked exactly the same from the outside. So this couple bought the Twonky, and the guy was very proud, like most guys would with when they get a new toy, right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Well, his wife bought it. His wife
bought it. Okay. Well, so anyway, a whole series of events then occurs, and this is a part where I'm actually not too sure how to continue, to be honest.
Well, it's great.
I love it. So you interrupted my summarization to summarize it to exactly the same point where I stopped.
Yeah.
All right.
Totally.
Good. Wow. What a fantastic time. So after.
For sure, man. What are we if not conflict?
Right.
All right, it's good. I love it that he stopped right where I stopped. I was like, all right, what's the carry on? So the story continues on with the friend of Carrie's comes over, Fitz, who basically tries to help him out throughout the entire situation, and he keeps getting basically more and more sedated by this thing until he's not really acting like himself anymore. His wife is worried. And through a course of events, basically the wife decides that no, this should be destroyed. She takes an axe to it, and then the thing vaporizes her just completely. She's out of existence.
I mean,
she's gone.
I mean, what?
Well,
so...
it's fine. It's a summary. Just let me finish.
Okay, fine.
So she dies. Carrie's like, "Hey man, that's not cool." And then the fucking radio vaporizes him as well. He's gone. And the terrible, chilling end of the story is that someone else is buying the house, and the Twonky's there. So this is gonna happen again.
I was just going to add that the Twonky, it actually comes to life. It's I mean, the way it started to control the other guy was it sent out a hypnotizing beam of some sort, and then every time he lights a cigarette, the Twonky would actually walk towards the guy and take the cigarette away from him and snuffs it out. Whenever he tries to read a book that the Twonky doesn't approve of, it will walk to him and take the book out of his hands. So imagine this cabinet in your house suddenly walking up to you, growing out some kind of tentacles, and doing all this shit.
We're left with the impression that this gadget comes from a future in which is hinted that most of the population is under very strict mind control by some sort of totalitarian nightmare, because that's the purpose of these Twonkies, to keep people under close control
and keep them regulated.
Yeah, it's a somber ending, and it's a well-paced story. So although we've made it sound rather ridiculous, I think, but it's actually it doesn't go too fast to be believable in a sinister sort of way.
Yeah, I actually, there was a reason why I was leaving out a lot of the ridiculous parts out of my summary at first, because I think actually this is terrifying as hell. Like it's terrifying as me. It's terrifying as hell to me. The idea that I could buy an appliance and then it would turn me into a mindless robot. But I already have a phone, so I guess I can't talk.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, science fiction is coming true at the moment.
Yeah, just not quite in the literal way of a Twonky walking up to you, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, actually, we need Twonkies now because at the moment, at the moment, people are sort of looking at their smartphones and not looking where they're going.
So a Twonky can walk up and take the phone away out of their hands.
Well, yes, or at least guide them by the elbow and say, "No, look here, there's
Listen here, pal."
Well, okay, Cass, you've been pretty quiet. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, please, Cass, go on ahead.
Okay, so what I found really interesting about this story is that it was written in 1942, right? So the world was still in World War II. And there was very much this idea of they are the bad guys, we are the good guys, because this is written by the good guys. Yeah. Okay. And yet, what I found so interesting about this story and what fascinated me first about it was that Heny Kuttner and C.L. decided that even though they were fighting for righteousness, they could still come up with a story that looked beyond that towards a totalitarian future, right? When everything about everything was war effort, we are great, we will defeat these fascist bastards, right? They still were able to come up with this, what I like to call a fable. So they were able to come up with a fable. And they came up with it 70 years ago. And to my mind, as Nikki says, I don't think it has lost any of its terror. Because what it does is that it shows something, and it draws you in as a reader. You sort of go, hey, that Twonky, pretty cool, right? I mean, that's what everyone thought when they started reading. Oh, wow, look at that. This thing walks, and I would like to show it off at my next cocktail party, right? And then slowly, as you get further and further into the story, you realize that what you have first invited into your home, or inadvertently invited into your home, as something good and as something useful, if a little bit incomprehensible, then turns into actually a monster of authoritarianism, right? And I like this story because, to me, it has a lot of parallels to how the world works right now, right? Okay, and hold on, oopsies, and I'm back. Okay, so I just kind of thought, okay, we're not dealing with things that are the size of a cabinet anymore. We're dealing with this shit, right? Okay, so what I really appreciated, right, about the Twonky was that idea where even when they were part of a propaganda, in the middle of a propaganda movement, and whatever else you say about it, World War II, part of it was a propaganda movement, they were still able to come up with this kind of fable about things to watch out for, even though they were consistently told that they were in the right. So I found that to be incredibly prescient and highly laudable on their part to be able to come up with a story like this. And that's why I suggested it, especially for Halloween as well.
Yes. So what I thought about the story was I didn't look at it from that angle, to be quite honest. I mean, so first, I just want to say, technically speaking, the story was written with superb pacing because it was a lot like the Call of Cthulhu, where the dread is slowly built up upon, and I think that kind of slow pace works a lot better for. I don't think I would call this a horror story, but it definitely gives you the creeps. Yeah, it definitely makes the hair on your back of your neck stand up, kind of feeling. But there are when I was reading through the story, I could not help but so first of all, I didn't quite feel that much dread because the visualization of it was quite hilarious to me. So the humor took a lot of the sting away. What I did feel while reading through the story was like there are flashes of movie titles that just kept going across my mind as I was reading it. the first part in the beginning, I was thinking the Terminator. Some guy dropped in from the future and then did something. And then I was thinking of all the and then as I read on, I was just like remembering like there was this period in time where there was a very bleak outlook on science, or like the future, and we have like specifically the movie that came to mind was The Fly, the first one.
Okay. Yeah, right. That was great, that movie. The 1950s.
Yes.
Was it 53?
Something like that.
1953,
Yeah,
The Fly. Yeah.
I don't
Fantastic
remember.
movie.
It was along those lines where you have technology that's inevitably going somewhere, and it was horrifying. And I thought this story was written along those lines along those lines.
But XJ, I mean, the movie came around more than a decade after this story. I mean, if you're going to talk about that, and you've got a really good point, this story predated so much
Well, that's
of
true.
the references, right, that you're thinking about. I mean, that's what I love so much about the Twonky. It was just so groundbreaking for its time.
And elegantly put as well. Yeah. Just 5
Oh, damn it,
years-
I didn't break my phone.
just
Well, we're not getting that.
Yeah. To show sort of what might have been the influence of this story, just 5 years later, Jack Williamson wrote his With Folded Hands, which is a classic Twonky type story, only set much further in the future when robots are taking over. And I'll just read the last couple of paragraphs. What is the matter, Mr. Underhill? The alert mechanical must have perceived his illness. Are you unwell? No, there's nothing the matter with me, he gasped desperately. I've just found out that I'm perfectly happy under the Prime Directive. Everything is absolutely wonderful. His voice became dry and hoarse and wild. You won't have to operate on me. So there we are.
Right.
Excellent.
But that wasn't the Twonky, so I mean, okay.
That came after the Twonky.
5 years.
Yeah, I'm starting to. I can't believe it. It's the reversal of the century. You know, it's two enemy camps that are right now looking at their opponents and thinking, you know what, maybe I'll enjoy. And you know what, I'm with XJ at the moment. I don't think it. I mean, it's a good story, but I don't think it. Like some of the points in it are quite ridiculous. Like the whole thing with the like the beginning.
The beginning is ridiculous.
Is
Yes.
so stupid. Like
the setup
and
is awful.
if you stay on the same wavelength as the beginning, I completely get XJ's take. It's a comedy. Like if you keep with the whole premise, like that being in the back of your mind, I can understand, like looking at it as a funny thing. Like the thing is, I did read this a couple of times, so I kind of got where the whole thing was going and how terrifying it actually was. But I think if I only like always remembered the beginning through the entire time, I think I'd be laughing the entire way through.
You see, now what's interesting, Nikki, is that they made a movie out of it.
Oh,
and the movie was supposed to be a satire, which actually misses the whole point. Because in actual fact, as we all can see reading it, there is a distinct horrific element to it, especially as you get to the end. It gets more and more horrific, right? But it looks like, and I haven't seen the movie, I've just read about it.
When was the movie made? Do you know?
I can look it up, but it seems that it was played for laughs. And
1953.
1953. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. And it was kind of canned because it was supposed to be, this is a satire, this is supposed to be a comedy. And in actual fact, as I said, I tend to look at this story as a fable rather than a comedy. Yeah.
But if people who were so close to it were thinking of it as a comedy, perhaps that's
Well,
how the
you don't
general
know.
viewer.
You don't
I,
know
I
how
don't
close
know.
these
That's
people. They were Hollywood producers. I mean, they're idiots, right? I mean, how do
well,
we know? Yeah.
I mean, I think
they were getting sponsorships from Hollywood either.
Well,
The-
not that we're ever going to get sponsorships from Hollywood, but yeah.
the
Oh,
two
who
things the two things that I was keeping in mind when I was reading the story was so one, first of all, I was keeping in mind the times that it was written in,
Yeah. Hmm.
because there were a lot of shows at that time where visually the stuff that's going on is really stupid. Like the day the earth stood still, I was like,
Don't you like the day the
no, I liked it, but visually
you've
I
opened a
liked
can of
it. I
worms.
liked it. Not that much, but it was cool. But visually,
Nick too.
visually, it is very stupid compared to what we're seeing now, because like all the stuff were big and chunky and clunky, right? So the idea of a walking cabinet seems very funny to us right now, because it's just weird. But at that time, it probably wasn't weird. You know what I mean? Just because every piece of machinery they had at that time was huge. Everything was big back then. Computers are like 1 story tall or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, I know somebody who actually lived in and worked in London, Rob, and because he said he was the youngest in the firm at the time, and everybody else he said was over 60, he was tapped to do all of the computer work, and he would walk into the computer because it was just one room, right? I mean, that's how big it was, and that was in the 60s. So yes, absolutely, yes.
So
I wish we could.
Sorry, Nikki, go on.
I wish we could speak to a person who took, the pages of astounding science fiction in September when they opened this story for the first time,
Yeah.
and them read it as a person who lives in 1942 and ask them how they felt, because we don't really know.
Yeah.
It might be that people already thought that was a ridiculous idea that a cabinet is walking, or they could be terrified.
Totally.
I digress.
I mean, no, actually, that's a really good point that I was trying to bring up, because right now when I read it, so one, I thought it was a very, very clever way of taking what seems comedic in the beginning and then just slowly turning it into something that's quite horrifying. I think that takes skill. But the thing is, like Nikki just brought up, I don't know if that's what they intended, the couple.
If they ever do household robots, though, they will have to be approximately that size, won't they? Because they'll have to move around the house and use things that humans use.
Well, Pepper, I believe that Pepper, the household robot, is about that size. It's a bit taller, but it's also slimmer, right? So yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and you can always ask me anyway about what someone would have felt when he opened the magazine for the first time in 1942.
Good point. So what do you feel, Rob?
Well, I just accept it all. I lap it all up, I don't say things. I don't say to myself, oh, this is ridiculous. I hardly ever do that. I just accept everything.
Yeah,
You see,
I don't think Robert is
Rob
good.
and I know that we remember the time when our parents had the TV cabinets with the wooden doors, right, Rob?
Yeah.
Right? And you had the wooden doors because you didn't want everyone to think you were a pleb because you were watching TV. So you had to hide it behind these sliding wooden doors, right? So, it's kind of a different. So for me, if I were to read that, I think of my parents, and they would have thought, oh, this is the latest and greatest, and this is fantastic, right? And they just would have thought, yes, of course we would buy one of those. right? Because to me, I thought of the TV that my parents had, right, and the ones I've seen in the antique shops, which were big, which had the legs that would go out on an angle, right, and would have the wooden veneer covers, the slide doors that you would close in front of the TV. So knowing that, it's not so much of a jump. But for you, Nikki, and you, XJ, it actually may be.
I mean, here's my question. So there is an element that I feel like they were trying to introduce horror into the story pretty early on, which kind of means that they were going for a horror feel, like with the whole him coming up to it and seeing that it like walked out to the point where the socket wasn't even plugged in, right? And he had to like put the socket back
The plug
inside. And,
back in the socket, yeah.
And there was other elements that I can't currently recall, but the point is, maybe they were trying to go for more of a horror feel, but in essence it doesn't really matter what they were going for. I was more thinking about how it was received by the audience. Because let's say we find out, okay, they wanted to do this as a horror story, but it's also interesting to think about how people felt about it. I don't know if like Robert has a very good way of reading things, which is in my opinion not something that is actually that what's it called, it's either has been like it has come out of style, because majority of readers that I interact with, they all think about these things and they have to make sense and stuff like that. But perhaps that is the attitude that was in 1942, where they looked at it and be like, yeah, whatever, that makes sense. Yeah,
there is an element of yin yang in this one as well, because I was going to say, and I just looked it up, I was going to say that the counterbalance to the horrific element that is in the Twonky, right? The counterbalance to that, where we're seeing the negatives, and where we're seeing the positives, is in the story Mimsy with the Borogoves. Rob, you must know that one,
I
right?
haven't read that one. No, I've heard about it, but I haven't read it.
Right, where in actual fact, it's that same thing. There's this channel with something that's in the future. But instead of it being a negative, it actually is a positive, right? There is a positive aspect to this thing that comes from the future. And there was a really crap movie made out of Mimsy with the Borogoves called Mimsy, right? And oh my God, what a yawn that was. So I don't recommend that any readers watch it. We'll get heaps of hate mail for that. But what I find really interesting is where you have this balance, where you have a negative fable with the Twonky, and you have the positive fable with Mimsy with the Borogoves, right? Dudes, they were written by the same people.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, hey, at some point, what we may like to do in the future is to then read Mimsy with the Borogoves, which comes, of course, from Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll, and have a little bit of a comparison between their two visions, because it was the same guys. It was Lewis Padgett, right? So it was Heny Kuttner and C.L, and they wrote both stories. So that would be interesting, because they've got two completely different outcomes.
I mean, for this, for the Twonky, I think it is, I think for me it is undeniable that they were going for a horror, because a horror story, because at the very end, I mean, I cannot see any scenario in which a death trap machine is hiding in a house waiting for the next victims, right? That to me is an attempt at horror. The what I don't know is, like Nikki said, I don't know how the audience at that time would have received the idea of a walking cabinet. But from my perspective at this point in time, it does seem a little bit ridiculous. Yeah,
I think the horror is not primarily that it's waiting in the house for the next owners. The horror is what it tells us about the future, which this thing came from.
That too. Although I am actually not sure if it's in the future, because the guy that built the Twonky says he got into where he was through a temporal snag, but I remember the conversation between the guy and his professor friend was like, they were like, we don't really know if this is from the future or some other dimension kind of thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think it is just I would go with a possibility.
Well, you know, if you came from the past, you couldn't possibly create something like the Twonky that's able to read somebody's mind.
True.
No.
Technologically, right? I mean, if we assume that it's technology that we're talking about, so I think, I think he must have come from the future, and you know, he created because he used the parts that he had to be able to make it, right? So he was able. If you came from the past, you wouldn't know what these sorts of things were. I mean, he even said it was awkward and clumsy. So to him, he was dealing with substandard obsolete equipment to make the Twonky. But thanks to his superior knowledge, he was still able to make a functioning Twonky. So I think the inference is that actually he came from the future rather than the past.
Well, for sure he came from somewhere more technologically advanced.
Yeah.
It's very easy to depress the reader about the future. I remember one very short time travel story, just about a page long, and where a chap goes into the future and comes back the very second he started from. And they said, you know, can you tell us about the future? And he said, well, no, they gave me a choice. Did I want to remember it or did I want to forget it? And obviously I must have chosen to forget it. So, end of story.
Oh, delightful. That's nice. That is nice. Yeah. Good story.
Yeah. Well, Nikki, do you have anything to add? You've been pretty quiet. Although
You have been unusually quiet, Nikki.
I'm just letting you all talk about, you know, how positively you review the story until I speak.
Oh, so you have a conflicting opinion, please?
I didn't really like it, to be honest. Yeah. I think the concept is great, and that the ending is super cool, but the rest of it, I was just like, yeah, I mean, all right. Oh no, it's lighting my cigarettes. It took a book from me. Like, I don't know. I felt, until it vaporized people, I felt like I could just kick it down and it would just wobble like on the ground, like.
Yeah, hold on a sec though. Do you remember the controversy a few years ago where Amazon deleted books off people's Kindles without their permission?
No, don't remember.
I don't.
Oh, yeah, it actually happened that Amazon actually deleted books off people's Kindles without their permission.
Wow.
So how different is that to taking the cigarette out of your mouth and putting it out because, you know, you think that's... So
I'm not saying the concept is not scary, right? I agree. It is a scary concept. It just didn't feel like that in the story. It didn't grasp me like this. That it was that scary. On reminiscing upon it, of course, it is very, traumatic, and people doing that in real life to you is pretty horrific. But in the story, watching this dude struggle, like, oh man, I can't have a third cigarette today or something. Like, I don't know, it's really funny to me. It felt like a an episode in a drama where this stupid husband who. His wife is away and he buys a gadget that really pranks him out all the time.
So it felt like an episode of The Simpsons to you?
Yeah, sure, but maybe a Treehouse of Horrors one. So, I don't know. The execution is I guess lacking to me. Everything else is fine about the story.
So the specific scenario, the visualization it creates is what seemed offbeat to you. Am I right?
Yeah, and it's partially why I try to ostracize it from the summary that I was giving, because I was going to go into the elements that didn't work. I wanted to present things that do, and yeah, in the end, I think, Rob was begging for like a dud last time. For me, he got it.
Okay, well, I gotta agree with Nikki on this one. I did find the visual aspect of it, like taking a cigarette away, taking the book away, and then buy a walking cabinet to be a little bit on, shall we say, the Looney Tunes side. Yeah.
I meant a dud written by one of us.
Oh,
Well, we wouldn't do that. Right. But actually, coming
gotta
back,
ask you for the impossible. Yeah,
in
sorry.
case any of the listeners are interested, it happened in 2010, and Amazon, without anyone's permission, removed books from people's Kindles. And what is so interesting about this is that the books were Animal Farm in 1984.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, you can just look it
Wow.
up. 2010 Amazon Kindle. No, seriously. So
can't
in a
believe that
way,
shit.
so this is why this story kind of resonated with me, and I chose it because I could go, oh, that's already happened now. Moore and Kuttner may have written about it 70 years ago, but that's already happened, and that already happened 11 years ago.
It's nearly 80 years ago now, actually, 1942.
Right. Okay. Yes, that's right. Yeah, you're right. 80 years ago. Right. And it happened. And it happened in 2010.
This Amazon thing, Kaz, that you're mentioning, I find that absolutely gobsmacking. I mean, was any reason given? Was any investigation made about it?
These are tech giants, and of course it's owned by Jeff Bezos. Don't get me started. So
Here's the explanation from the New York Times. Like there was a sort of a
okay, please,
discussion.
Nikki.
So, in George Orwell's 1984, government censors erase all traces of news articles embarrassing to Big Brother by sending them down an incineration shed called the Memory Hole. On Friday, it was 1984, and another Orwell book, Animal Farm, that were dropped down the Memory Hole by Amazon.com. In a move that angered customers and generated waves of online critique, Amazon remotely deleted some digital editions of the books from the Kindle devices. An Amazon spokesman, Drew something, said in an email message that the books were added to the Kindle store by a company that did not have rights to them, using a self-service function. When we were notified of this by the rights holder, we removed the illegal copies from our system and from the customers' devices, and refunded the customers.
I mean, okay, it sets an interesting precedent.
This is how all conspiracy theory starts, all right?
Yeah.
Like
It's not a conspiracy theory if it happened.
but
It's not a theory if it happened.
No.
right, but the reasons behind it could be different to what you have imagined. It's a much more
It doesn't
romantic
matter.
story.
It doesn't matter because what Amazon is saying is that even though you paid for something, if we think that something is irregular, we can go in and take things off your device that you paid money for, that you think you own.
Right, but
Because
here
we
what they're
decided.
claiming. Right, go on, sorry.
Right? No, that's it. That's all I want to say.
Well, I mean, I
That-
think if because so the article sounds like they're doing a product recall, and that
But
is
you're usually told when there's a product recall.
yes. I was
and you're
about
usually
to. I was
coming,
about to say
yeah?
that. I was going to say like a proper way to do a product recall is to let everybody who's already gotten it know that there's a product recall coming. Yeah,
Right, but I far more believe into like interns not doing their job
could be.
than I do in like a mass conspiracy that these two books like
Re-
it's so you couldn't make it even like more crazy.
Right.
Remembering my time as an intern, I can absolutely agree with Nikki.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. And and I've actually got a friend who's got a Subaru, and her car is under recall, and she was told about it, and she had to make an appointment, and yada yada yada. Right. So there is a process. Even if an intern screwed up, there is still a process, and the process was not got through. We didn't go through a process. Amazon decided to summarily do it because they could, without going through the process. I don't care about the reasons. I don't care about the justification. All I care about is the fact that they did not treat their customers like they were adults. They treated the customers more like they were babies. Oh, you're sucking on a lolly. I don't like that because it's going to give you cavities. I'll take that away from you, right? So that's what I disagree with. Well, why they did it, whether I don't care about that. All I'm concerned about is the process. And Amazon screwed up. And of course, it screwed up over 1984 and Animal Farm. My God,
So
right?
symbolic, yeah.
Yeah. But it could have been anything. I mean, it could have been, Good Night Moon. I don't care. It's still the process I'm more worried about rather than the book itself. Right. And now we see this. And as Rob points out, it wasn't 70 years ago. This story was written 80 years ago. And it's the process. We see the same process where something else decides to treat a human adult as though they were a child, infantilizing them and forcing them to adhere to certain rules of compliance that are authoritarian.
All right. On the next episode, we'll talk about the the death of JFK and the moon landings. Look, I'm not saying you're wrong, Kaz. I'm just saying that I think you're reading in a bit too much into this.
Well,
story.
maybe I am because I'm one of my interests is cybersecurity and internet security, exploits, phishing, all of that kind of stuff. So am I sort of a little bit more paranoid than the average person? Yep, sure. Fair cop, right? And maybe that's where I'm coming from, and I'm willing to cop to that. But just because I am doesn't mean that it doesn't have a degree of truth about it, right?
Right. Yeah,
well, it helps to be paranoid if you're a science fiction writer.
Yeah. That's very true.
I suppose.
But yeah, I didn't like the Twonky. Anyway, that's what we're talking about, right?
So you said you don't like the Twonky because the front part of it seemed really ridiculous to you. What else don't you like about it?
Well, it's so the mood kind of kept crashing for me. So instead of it being like a coherent story, it kind of fell apart once I realized that it's supposed to be scary. So on the first read, anyways. On the second read, going into the fact that I know this is supposed to be scary, I was like, yeah, this is pretty strange and weird and shouldn't be happening in you. But right upon until, like, I thought the wife would hit the thing, and then it would, like, tell it how to hit it harder and at a better angle or something, right? Because it's helpful. It's a helpful thing. Like, oh, you shouldn't read this because it will corrupt your mind. You shouldn't, like, you should swing your, like, arms a different way or something, so that, like, you don't stretch your back while you're destroying me. But no, it vaporizes her, and then it vaporizes
her.
Yeah, it vaporizes her and the husband. So for me, that was like, what just happened? So I didn't I didn't expect that. And unlike in most of times when I don't expect something and I'm surprised by a twist, it was more so jarring to me because the rest of the tone of the story felt comedic to me.
So for you in the beginning it was more you see it more as the Twonky was being helpful.
Well, yeah, because it's all right. Smoking is bad, right? And maybe this dude, I don't know what books he's picking up. All right, obviously we get told later, but the oh my god, look, it did not hit the beats of being scary. It hit the beats of kind of being a funny thing. And when something is funny, you kind of overlook some of the darker parts of it. Because I am a person who finds dark humor quite enjoyable, so I didn't even kind of second think that this could be not funny, with my humor.
Well, yes, as I said
parameters.
in the beginning, the humorous part of it did take some of the horror sting away from me. And I mean, the word I was trying to use to describe the kind of scene it brought to me is campy. It's campy in the beginning. Yeah. It was a little bit campy.
But I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that it's like a huge walking thing. I think it was more for me that at least the tone, the way it was written, didn't feel scary. It felt very matter of fact. That's the style of writing that got me there. At least the one I felt while reading. Yeah, it was much more, much less sinister. Maybe perhaps because they, like it was so overloaded with that kind of feeling that I completely missed the horror aspect on the first read. And maybe I wasn't paying attention.
So how would you compare this to the Call of Cthulhu?
Call of Cthulhu immediately starts with an imperial dread that kind of persists through the entire story, because we get descriptions of terrible things that keep on happening. These reports keep on coming, these newspaper articles, all of this investigation. Right, we're in the mind of a person who's paranoid, and when you're in the mind of someone who's paranoid, you believe that anything is possible. So it takes you right into that feeling. But here, just because, all right, I think it's actually because Carrie has the reaction of like, well, whatever, man. It's just walking. Who cares? So I thought, aha, so they're trying to present it in a way where this is normal. Like, this is a cute little thing that's happening. Like a sitcom, right? Because, like, some things really don't make any sense in a sitcom. When you're really watching it, like, if it was actually happening to you, you would be super mad. Or like scared, but because it's played for laughs, you kind of forget about it, and it's the same here. I just felt his reaction was so nonchalant, and so it was so easy going through this entire thing. Yeah.
Okay. So for you, what it sounds like trying to make this the way it is written just did not properly convey the sense of horror to you right from the start. Maybe at the end when it started vaporizing people. That's when you start to get the idea that this is not supposed to be happening.
And that happened in the end, so I had no time to be like, so this is crazy.
The twist came too sudden.
The impression I got a fairly steady progression from light-heartedness to from sort of farce to something more serious. I thought the progression was fairly smooth. I think I don't think I've got any negative things to say about the story. I would say that it's probably not something I would reread, because it makes its point so with such finality that I sort of don't feel I'd need to read it. Although maybe in a few decades' time, when I'm sort of 100, I might read it again. I don't know, but I doubt it. Whereas something like The Call of Cthulhu, one reads it every decade or so, because there's a lot. It's just it's all on a much deeper level.
Cool.
So now that we have thoroughly devastated your pick, Kaz, you gotta say anything?
Actually, what I will say is that I thought it was a very forward-looking short story. The other thing that I liked about, because it preempted a lot of the later science fiction horror movies, like, as you said, XJ, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Fly, all of those sorts of things. All of those films actually came after this story. This story actually came before. Right. So, I'm going to say it was a bit of a groundbreaker in an era where good and evil were very clearly marked out, and they were on the side of good. So that's number one. Number two, it actually portrayed women as being humans, which was fantastic, because as we all know, if we go to Asimov, they're cardboard cutouts. If we go to Robert Heinlein, they've only got nipples that go spung, and, they're someone's granddaughter who gets screwed. So, the idea of having a female who was a bit more fully realized with her own personality was, from that time, 80 years ago, is phenomenal. I just think it was fantastic. And I've always liked the writings of Kuttner and Moore. I'm a huge fan. If you were to give me some, I would go, yeah, okay, sure, I'll read it, just because it's Kuttner and Moore. So I really liked. Those were their strengths, and that's why I chose this one, this story. And that's okay, because as a woman, I'm going to see different things in it, right? And of course, with my background, I'm going to see different things in it as well, and that's fine, and that's cool. That's what this whole discussion group is all about. But yeah, I was pretty damn impressed with that story.
Nikki, last thoughts?
I mean, I think Kaz pointed out something very interesting, because indeed it's the female protagonist in the story who takes the axe to the thing, and actually the whole thing happens when she's on vacation, so she can't interact with it in any way, shape, or form until it's too late. So maybe if she was in the house, and Kara was like, "Yeah, honey, anyway, so the broadcasting radio walked out, and I had to put its socket back in," maybe she'd be like, Are you crazy, man? We need to get out of here now. Call the police. Call the air forces. Like, who knows what this thing is? What do you mean it walked and snatched your cigarette? So, it's actually, you're right. The portrayal of this female character, not something I was thinking, but now that you've pointed it out, yeah, she's very proactive for 1942. Yeah, it's. So there is merit in the story. Unfortunately, I still don't like
it. Rob, what about you? Do you have any last thoughts on the matter?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're Robert, right?
Right.
Maybe you're not Robert. Has the Twonky gotten
Oh shit!
to you?
Yeah.
I get Kaz's point about the historical importance of the story. Because I can think of quite a few other stories, sort of descendants of it. The one I mentioned, there's also one by Robert Sheckley, Dimension of Miracles. It's a novel, actually, but it also has a chap who goes into a newly built city, and this city is designed to be as comfortable as possible. And eventually he just can't stand it, and he moves out, and he realizes that there was a reason why he was the only person there, because everybody else couldn't stand it and moved out as well. Because it kept the city, disembodied voice all around you kept saying things like, if you don't sit up straight, you'll damage your spine, and things like that. So
I think that was just a metaphor for nagging, though.
Oh, it's nagging, yes, and unlike the Twonky, it doesn't actually enforce its nags, so it's not quite the same.
I was just trying to make a joke. It is an interesting story, to be fair.
Well,
so actually, you got something to say, actually? Yeah.
Well, to wrap up, I think I'm largely on the same camp as Nikki. Although the reason why I found it a little bit comedic is came from a different direction. I was just like looking at it and thinking like the Twonky just got into my house.
That's what you were thinking?
No, I mean, sorry, that was like a huge crash behind me, somewhere in the house. Yeah. Anyway, I was gonna say, like, visually speaking, it was just a very very dated concept. It's very Looney Tunes, very Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck kind of a feeling to me. So it was very hard for me to take that part of the story seriously, although I'm willing to grant it some leeway just because of the times that it came from. I thought that the pacing of turning the story into a horror story was actually really good. It was very slow, and it just kind of builds up over time until the end when the vaporizing starts, and that's when like the shit's got real, man, kind of feeling. And then
Oh my god!
and then the end part where, you know, the Twonky is like lying in wait in the house for the next potential converts to come to it. I thought that was very creepy. That was very creepy. Yeah. I think one of the good things about science fiction that it can do above all other genres is if it actually manages to predict the future properly. And that is a very powerful I wouldn't call it a fable, but it's a very powerful tool it has to open up discussions, let's say. Although I don't know if it's the first. I mean, I don't really know what you mean, Kaz, when you say it's the first of its kind. Because when I'm thinking of horrific science fiction, like science going badly wrong, I would trace it all the way back to Frankenstein, actually. I would that would be my first horror science fiction.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll give you that. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And anyway, for me, it was a fairly enjoyable read. I do like it, although like Rob, I probably wouldn't read it again. Yeah. Cool. And that's it from me. Do we have any last words?
There are some other Kuttner and Moore stories which I would read again. Kaz, is Vintage Season, was that written by both of them, or was it just by C.L. Moore?
That one I really don't know, because actually I'm more a Kuttner fan than a Moore. Although I do appreciate what she brings to stories, to be honest with you. I think it was much needed in golden age science fiction, right? So I do admire her, but it's just that I seem to have glommed more into the Kuttner than the Moore, to be honest. But between the Twonky and Mimsy, I mean, dead impressed, dudes. Dead impressed.
All right. Well, it looks like we can wrap up the Twonky. It's I think it's well worth at least reading once. How's that? Yeah. Okay. So maybe we open with Nikki. Maybe Nikki, you can close us off again.
Yeah, why not? So everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you are a big corporation like Amazon and Hollywood, we love you. Actually, send us all gifts. Don't listen to Kat. You are the overlords. I've opened the doors. Come into my house. I welcome my capitalist overlords. I really love to join you all guys to talk about stuff, no matter the story. So thank you for the enjoyment that I had, and I hope that enjoyment also somehow is transferred to our viewers. So like, comment, subscribe, tell your mother about this, tell your father, make them all subscribe on YouTube. Make sure that they tell everybody else they know. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Have a great day wherever you are, whenever you see this. I hope you have a good time ahead.